All right, first here on CIBC World Markets releasing its 5-year forecast for oil and exports from America's top oil suppliers. That's the name of the report. And joining us now, the author of the forecast, Jeff Rubin, chief economist and chief strategist at CIBC. Jeff, interesting report because it looks like one of the big takeaways is that OPEC, oil-producing countries, are using a whole lot of oil, and they might not have so much to export over the next few years.
That's right. I mean, OPEC's exports are probably going to drop about 500,000 barrels a day because of soaring domestic oil consumption. We see these trends in other oil-producing countries as well. In fact, OPEC, Mexico, and Russia consumed last year 12.3 million barrels a day. That's about 60% more than China. It is now the second largest oil market in the world, second only to the U.S.
And why is that? Just because they're grossly inefficient? Or, I mean, we know they subsidize
Well, when you
energy
fill up
costs.
your tank in Caracas or Riyadh, you'll soon find out. I mean, gasoline at 23, 40 cents a gallon. We, too, would have those kind of oil consumption numbers. This year, oil consumption in Saudi Arabia is growing at 9% a year. And what's happening is they're beginning to cannibalize their own export capacity.
I would think, although I certainly understand your point, what you also need for oil consumption to go up is a growing middle class. And it's not clear to me that in Venezuela or Saudi Arabia you have any significant growth in the middle class.
Venezuela's a little different, but the Middle East, those economies are growing at almost double-digit rates right now, as would be expected given where oil prices are. When you overlay that with prices that are not $80 a barrel, but $10 a barrel, you're turbocharging domestic demand at precisely the same time that production is no longer growing at the pace it once did. In Mexico, the U.S.'s second largest producer, production is plummeting by maybe as much as 1 million barrels a day over the next 5 years.
So then we need to turn to other sources.
We have to turn to unconventional sources. Probably we're going to have to become more dependent on Canada. Canada is right now about 23% of U.S. supply. It will go to about 30% of U.S. supply by the next 5 years. But when we're talking about Canada, we're not talking about conventional oil. We're talking about Canadian oil sands because that's where all the future export capacity is.
And outside our own...
problem?
No, it's not a problem, but that's a world of high oil prices, not low oil prices. As we see all over the world, conventional oil is now being replaced by high-cost unconventional oil.
Canada is already our largest oil supplier.
That's right.
And then Mexico, number 2, and then Saudi Arabia?
Mexico will not be an oil exporter within 5 years. In fact, Mexico may actually find itself in the same position as Indonesia now finds itself, being a net oil importer.
So you're saying that the second largest supplier of oil to the United States will not be selling any in 5 years?
Will not be exporting oil to the United States within 5 years.
Can Canada pick up that slack?
Canada can pick up some of the slack with high-cost oil sands. Other places like Angola and Brazil can pick up some of the slack. But the bottom line here is that it's going to be very difficult to replace conventional imports. And that, of course, points to a regime of very high oil prices going forward. How high? I mean, we're talking basically $100 oil prices.
$100 oil prices.
I don't know. We can just invade Canada and take care of that one.
Oh, we've got that big supply under the Arctic that Putin claims.
Yeah, but who owns that?
That's nowhere near the fields that we're talking about. We're basically talking about unconventional oil, the Canadian oil sands and the Venezuelan oil sands as the future supply. Venezuela, as you know, is a problematic source of supply for the U.S., and I think that's going to focus more attention on Canada.
So this is assuming that we don't find some gigantic field.
Well, this is also assuming that oil consumption hardly grows in the United States over the next 5 years.
Right.
I think that's a reasonable assumption in a world of $100 oil prices. After all, consumption did not grow last year in the United States, and we had $70 oil prices.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate
My pleasure.
Thanks very
Jeff
much,
Rubin.
Jeff. Interesting.
Jeff Rubin, chief economist and chief strategist, CIBC World Markets.